Hi, guys, and welcome to Settling Oregon, Utah, and California. Well, the Oregon Trail became famous. Remember the Santa Fe Trail that was just used for trading back and forth? The Oregon Trail was a one-way trip where thousands of people went from East Coast all the way to the West Coast and settled in Oregon. People left many different locations. Oregon Trail is not really one trail. Most of the middle was one trail, but people would start from several locations up and down the Mississippi River and end up in a few different locations in Oregon. But St. Joseph, Missouri, and Independence, Missouri were two of the more popular going off places right on the Mississippi River. This was the furthest west that American civilization could go. If you wanted to take a railroad, you can go all the way to Missouri. You can go all the way to the Mississippi River, somewhere up and down here, probably Independence, St. Joseph, Missouri, maybe Lawrence, Kansas. You could take a railroad there, but then you had to leave and walk all the way across over half of America to get to Oregon. And a favorite destination was the Willamette Valley, the valley of the Willamette River, which was absolutely gorgeous farmland. It was about 2,000 miles, and they traveled by covered wagon, most of them. All their earthly belongings fit in one wagon, and you would live in that wagon. That's where you would sleep. If there wasn't enough room on top of your barrels and boxes of stuff, maybe you have a sleeping bag or a blanket or something, and you sleep on the ground outside. Obviously, it was very dangerous. There's only the food that you bring with you. So if you run out of food, that's a problem. If you run out of water, that's a problem. Hopefully, you can go hunting and replenish your water along rivers and things. But I hope you find everything you need. On page 240 and the purple, there's a purple box there. It says Life on the Trail. Let me read to you about that. It says the settlers on the trail faced many hardships. Missionary Narcissa Whitman rejoiced at being able to wash clothes near Parma, Idaho. And Mrs. Whitman took a diary of the Oregon Trail, and I believe it is in your activity book. So when we get back together, when everyone has their books, we'll read some of that. It's really great. And one note, she said, "Yes, I was able to do laundry today because it's been weeks before we had a river to wash our clothes in." It says this was only the third time she had been able to wash clothes in 1,500 miles of travel. I'm sure you can imagine those clothes were very dirty and stinky. Diaries tell of travelers with cracked lips and dry noses in the dry lands. They didn't have chapstick. You know what they did have is like pork fat, bacon grease or something. They would keep that and smear that on their lips. Near or just west of the 100th meridian of longitude, the turf changed to bunch grasses, and the color shifted from green to brown and tan. Even the animals were different. Bison, jackrabbits, prairie dogs, and horned lizards surprised the travelers. By the way, there was a prank that they would pull on newbies. The people who knew the area would pull it on newcomers, and they would show them a jackalope. A jackalope is a jackrabbit, which is like a bunny rabbit, but it's a little bit bigger and skinnier and has great big ears. So take a jackrabbit and it has antelope horns on it. And they would show a stuffed jackalope to these new people. Now, obviously, there are no bunnies with deer horns in real life. No, they would just mount the deer horns onto the bunny rabbit's head. Say, "Hey, look, it's a jackalope. It's a jackrabbit antelope." And a lot of people got fooled that way. Let's keep reading. Rattlesnakes struck at both livestock and humans. Their venom was fatal to animals, although it did not always kill humans. And as you can imagine, there's no real roads out there, so you're just going through the wilderness. So there's going to be snakes and holes everywhere. And if you have two oxen pulling your wagon and one of them steps in a snake hole and gets bitten by a rattlesnake and dies, you're in trouble. Hopefully, you have some spare cattle with you. Rattlesnake struck, blah, blah, blah. Bolts of lightning zigzagged across the sky and touched the earth as late afternoon thunder showers struck. Sometimes those lightning strikes, hit people in the middle of the prairie where there's no trees. Your wagon might be the tallest thing around and might attract lightning. Even if it doesn't hit you, it might cause a prairie fire and light all the grass on fire. That's a problem. Sleepy children often fell off wagons. That could easily get hurt. And sometimes were run over by iron-shod wagon wheels. Very common to hear of a broken leg or a broken arm because someone fell off the wagon and got rolled over. Wear your seatbelt, kids. Rolled into almost every mile on the trail are little known stories of self-reliance, determination, courage, and answered prayers. Pretty cool. It would take all summer, and you really want to start very early because if you don't, you might hit right around here by fall or early winter, and that's the Rocky Mountains. And crossing a mountain range on foot is very difficult in the best of times, but you do not want to cross the mountains in winter. You will get stuck. And yes, there is a story of a group of people led by Mr. Donner called the Donner Party who were down here somewhere in the middle of the mountains in the middle of winter, and many people starved to death, and it got really nasty. So you definitely want to start really early. You can't start too early because then you might run into blizzards in the plains here. And in the Midwest, they do get blizzards with many feet of snow that you're just stuck there for several days, not longer. In 1844, about 1,500 people left for Oregon. The next year, that doubled to 3,000 people. By 1847, 4,000 people were leaving every single year, and that number just ballooned and ballooned until thousands upon thousands of people are rushing out west. So it's very interesting how we started on the East Coast, moved all the way to the Mississippi, and then we kind of skipped the entire Midwest and settled the West Coast, and then we started settling around here later on. All up and down the trail, there are fun sights to see. There was this giant dome of a rock called Independence Rock, because if you weren't there by July 4th, then you were late. So that kind of marked your trail. There's one called Chimney Rock. That's a really cool pillar that looks kind of like a chimney. It's an old volcano. So the interior of the volcano is much harder lava than the exterior. So all the dirt and ashes on the outside got washed away over time, and you're left with just a column of lava in the middle of the desert. Pretty cool. Um, all up and down the road, people eventually set up little villages and towns where they would have trading posts to sell to these people going across the country, very much like our modern day like exits on the highway have a lot of food and roadside attractions. They would do that as well. And here's a few here: Scotts Bluffs, Nebraska; Casper, Wyoming; Twin Falls, Idaho; Boise, Idaho; the Dulles, Pendleton, Vancouver. Lots of fun towns right up there on the Oregon Trail. And back in California, you recall how California got settled because of a gold rush. I have a few more details here for you today. John Sutter was the name of a farmer way out west in California. He bought 1,000 acres from Spain back when Spain owned California, set up a little town for himself, and hired a guy named James Marshall to build him a sawmill by a river. That sawmill would use a water wheel, to move a saw, and that saw would go up and down and up and down and cut planks because you're going to be building lots and lots and lots of buildings soon. Marshall deepened the river to make it go faster, and he found a gold nugget in the river. They tried to keep it a secret, but eventually one of the workers also finds gold, and they spend that gold in town. People are like, "Where'd you find that?" Nowhere. And word gets out eventually. People figure out where that money's coming from, and the gold rush began. The miners who rush out west call themselves Argonauts after the old Greek story of Jason and the Golden Fleece, who went on the ship Argo. So the Argonauts, they're out searching for gold. In 1849, about 80,000 men rushed to California, getting the name 49ers, like San Francisco 49ers. We already talked about this a little bit earlier, but we're talking about it a little more today. How did they get that gold? One method is called panning, where you take this pan, like a cooking pan or something, a big old plate or dish of some kind, and you shake it in the water, and you try to collect the gold dust from the water, and the dirt floats to the top, and the gold flakes are heavier, and they come down to the bottom. There's a story about a guy who ran a laundry, like a laundromat type thing, doing the laundry for folks, and he would collect all the gold dust that was in the boots and cuffs, pant cuffs, and he made a lot of money just collecting all the gold dust from the mud on their clothes. That's pretty funny. In this picture, we have people a little more sophisticated than just this little pan. We have this big rectangular sheet, and they're going to be combing through all the pebbles and stuff, throwing away the pebbles and putting on, more shovelfuls of dirt and sand and muck. To go even faster, they invented this thing called hydraulic mining, which I don't know if you've ever seen a real fire hose in action. They are incredibly powerful. They got hydraulic pumps that would blast water at really, really high speeds and forces, and they would blast apart whole hills, and in those hills would be gold nuggets. Obviously, incredibly damaging for the environment. They just were destroying whole ecosystems and blasting it to smithereens, leaving nothing but dirt and rocks in their wake. But it was highly effective at moving lots and lots of dirt very, very quickly and getting to the sweet, sweet gold at the bottom. This contraption is called a sluice. So you have a long, 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 like river, man-made river made out of probably wood, but then every so often you have like a stick going across, and the water flows over the top, and the gold dust settles down and gets trapped underneath every like little dam. Here you have a grid, and you see yellow gold dust getting trapped in that grid. You could kind of clean it out later. Pretty ingenious. And then, of course, after the rivers were dry of any gold, you'd have to look deeper and you'd go down into a mine. These mines were very dangerous, especially the early ones, just made by random people who had no idea what they were doing. They would just dig down. And if you weren't careful, that cave will collapse in on you, and lots of people died that way. Here is a sophisticated mine that has a roof to try to keep the dirt and rocks from collapsing on top of you. It has these posts up on top, and hopefully those are strong enough. You want to keep a good eye on those so the weather doesn't rot them. You also have a little railroad in here, and that would not be like one with an engine on it. It's probably just a car that would either be pushed by people or by an animal. Maybe a mule would be dragging a cart up and down that railroad. But you've got to imagine how many thousands and thousands of pounds of rock are being taken out of that mine every single day and then smashed up while you're looking for the gold. Um, Highly effective. So what are they going to do with all that gold once they get it? Well, unfortunately, a lot of it was spent right away because everything was incredibly expensive out in California. Remember how the Santa Fe Trail can make you a lot of money because everything costs so much more in the middle of the Mexican desert because there's just no good transportation. Your book says one potato would cost a whole gold dollar, and some people were being paid $2 or $3 a week. So imagine today if a potato was worth 500 bucks, maybe. What? That's a lot of money. A good pair of boots might go for 30 gold dollars. What? That's like a couple months' salary, maybe, for a pair of boots. In addition to paying for the necessary expenses of food and clothing, a lot of them wasted their money on drinking, gambling, and immorality. So unfortunately, a lot of the fortune that was made was lost immediately. Miners would do something called staking a claim. That means I claim this land and I'm going to put wooden stakes in the ground on the boundaries and put string or something around it and say, this is my land. I'm staking my claim. But sometimes you have several people who claim the same land, where you have someone called a stake jumper who is mining for gold on someone else's land. Disputes were common, and because there were very few sheriffs out there, you usually fixed your dispute with your fists or with your gun. Um, and unfortunately, lots of people did die because of disputes over who gets what gold. Greed makes people very angry and violent. Not good. Robbery was also very common. If you imagine people have bags of gold with them, robbery's going to be very common. And a lot of the time, you don't want to leave witnesses, so you rob the guy and then kill him. Not all the people who rushed out west went out to get money. A lot of people said, well, I don't know how to mine for gold, but I bet I can make a lot of money some other way besides mining for gold. A lot of the people realize, hey, if thousands of people are going to be mining all day long, they're going to want stuff. They're going to want restaurants. They're going to want hotels. They're going to want a place to stay. They're going to want laundry services. They're going to want pies. grocers, blacksmiths, traders, tailors, everyone rushed out because they wanted to get paid in gold and they wanted to charge a fortune. There was a gentleman by the name of Levi Strauss who was a clothes maker, and he went out west and he was selling clothes to the miners. And he realized a lot of miners are complaining that their pants are wearing out way too soon. They're wearing thin cotton pants. That was the style of the day. So imagine, guys or girls, imagine a nice set of Sunday pants, not the most heavy material ever. And so they're all ripping and tearing. These guys are out, in nature, climbing mountains all day long or in the lake all day long, and they're ripping. So he says, I'm going to make a really strong pair of work pants that's going to be very rugged. So he takes some blue fabric that was meant for making tents. It was a canvas style fabric from the town of Nîmes, Nîmes or denim, and he invented the world's first blue jeans. Then he said, I don't want the seams to rip as you're moving around, so I'm not going to sew it once, I'm going to sew it twice. So look at your pair of blue jeans. Does it have a double line of thread around it? That was Levi Strauss's idea. And then lastly, to make sure it will never rip, he didn't just sew the pockets on, he riveted them on with metal rivets. And like, this thing isn't going anywhere. These are the strongest pair of pants you'll ever find. And Levi Strauss invented the Levi's company of blue jeans. Jean is named for Genoa, Italy, and Nîmes is Nîmes, France. Denim jeans, pretty cool. And yeah, they worked really well. By the fall of 1849, California wrote a constitution. They prohibited slavery, and so they asked to become a free state, and the slave state said, no, we don't want you. They did not become a state for another year because so in 1844, we have a new presidential election. Mr. Clay ran as the Whig nominee. Remember Tyler, the man without a party, his accidency, this president that only became president because the president died and he was vice president. No one likes Tyler, so his party doesn't let him run, and they choose Clay instead. And Clay is running up against Martin Van Buren, who is planning on running as a Democrat. But last minute, the Democrats say, we don't want Martin Van Buren. We want James K. Polk. And you go, who's James K. Polk? Exactly. No one really knew who he was. He was in Congress, but he was very new to politics, and not a lot of people knew him, especially people not from his state. He was a new person. That's why you call it dark horse, a surprise candidate that all of a sudden everyone's talking about James K. Polk and not Martin Van Buren. Martin Van Buren's already been president. Why not give him another chance to run for president? Nope, we want James K. Polk. And if you know anything about our list of presidents, James K. Polk did win, and we never did have a President Clay. James K. Polk ran on a slogan that was very, very popular at the time. Everyone wants to expand America to bigger than it's ever been. We want to go out to California, out to Oregon, out to Texas, everywhere. And he said, if you elect me, I'll get you all of Texas, all of Oregon. See, there was a lot of arguments as to whether Texas should be a state. Texas is not a state right now. If it becomes a state, it's going to become a slave state. And most Northerners do not want Texas to be a slave state. And then with Oregon, there was a dispute with Canada about the borders of Oregon and Canada. And he said, well, I'm going to take it all, or I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight Mexico if they don't let me get Texas, and I'm going to fight Canada and England, which owned Canada at the time. I'm going to fight England if they don't give me all of what I want. And he wins the presidency. Another slogan of his was 54-40 or fight, and that was the top of the Oregon territory that he said he wanted, the northernmost part. And I'll show you in a map in a second. Texas was annexed by Tyler while after the election. Between the election and when the next guy actually becomes president, you're called a lame duck. And in one of his last important things, President Tyler annexed Texas and did make it a state. He passed a joint resolution of Congress, which only needs simple majority, 51%, not a super majority. It's getting complicated. He got Texas for us. Here is Oregon territory. Canada, all around here is called Oregon. Canada says the line should be down here at the 42nd parallel, and Canada wants all this land. America says, no, the border should be up here at the 5440 line, and we want all of it. So we have territorial disputes with two nations, with Mexico about Texas and with England and Canada about this one. And he is going to find a different solution with both of these. First of all, England is a very powerful nation, especially on sea. They have a major navy, and we don't want to pick a fight with them. So how do we resolve this dispute? We decide to sit down at a table with our ambassadors and talk about it, debate, and then compromise like good neighbors should. And we argued and we debated and we finally shook hands and said, let's cut it exactly down the middle. 49th parallel. That make everyone happy? Yes, everyone's happy. That is how nations should treat their neighbors. When there's a problem, you talk about it, you sit down, you discuss, you even argue if you need to, but eventually you come to a conclusion and you shake hands and you walk away friends. Has there ever been an America versus Canada war? No. I will say, while all this stuff was going down and people were kind of angry, there's a lot of islands over here. See that area in the Vancouver area? There was this little island that had both Americans and English people living on it. And people are getting mad at each other about who owns what land. Well, an English pig got loose and got into an American garden and started eating all the vegetables. So the American farmer got mad and shot the pig and then started butchering it. And so the English guy calls up his army and says, "Hey, army, this guy shot my pig. Go get him." And then the American guy called up the American Navy and said, "Hey, this English guy is going to get me. Go get him." So both of the American and British navies here have soldiers on the island. They're both ordered by the governments to attack one another and start a war. And the American captain and the British captain said, "No, I'm not going to shoot anyone or start a war about a pig and some carrots. That's stupid." So they sat him down with a few lawyers and decided who owed who how much money because of how much garden was damaged and how much pig was damaged. And they came to a reasonable conclusion. But the American government ordered the American military to start a war. And he said, "No, I'm not going to start a war about a pig. That's stupid." And thankfully, we did not go to war. We just sat down and talked about it. There you go. We ended up splitting the territory in half. We already had this border over here. The 49th parallel stopped right here, and then we didn't really know what the border was here, and we said, let's just extend that border. Made perfect sense. However, when we talk about the Texans and what the border should be there, we're not going to be good neighbors to Mexico. At the same time that we're really good neighbors to Canada, we're really bad neighbors to Mexico. We'll talk about that another time. There's a couple islands here and there that got left on the wrong side of the border, but oh well. So Polk did not get all the way up to 5440, and he decided not to fight because it's not worth fighting about. All right, see you tomorrow.